What's up everyone, Alex here. So it's really awesome that Bandai Namco has been remastering a lot of their classic PS1 platformers, and for this video I want to talk about my experience with Pac-Man World Re-Pac, which is a remaster of Pac-Man World, which was released on the PS1. Unlike my coverage of Klonoa, however, I've never actually played through Pac-Man World when it was originally released on the PS1, so I get to experience this for the first time as a new player. The gameplay that you're seeing right now is from the Nintendo Switch version of the game, so unfortunately I can't give you any sort of info on the other versions of it. But I will say that if you love platformers, I think you're gonna find a lot to enjoy here. In terms of platforming mechanics, you have your typical jump, you have kind of like a float mechanic. It's like a Looney Tunes kind of like running in place, but you're only moving forward like so minuscule, just to kind of keep yourself up in the air. But that's kind of helped me out a couple of times when I'm trying to negotiate gaps that are a bit longer than what I was expecting. In addition to this, Pac-Man also has kind of like a maneuver that's similar to Sonic's Spin Dash, where he runs in place to charge up and then he launches himself forward into a ball so he can clear gaps using ramps, for example. But outside of that, this is also used to operate various platforming elements that are scattered about, like these elevators here. And if for some reason you want to do this, you can also defeat bad guys with the Spin Dash as well. Quite honestly, I only use the Spin Dash in the first two instances. I don't really use them to defeat enemies. So this is kind of like a weird mechanic to have in a Pac-Man game, admittedly. I do use his butt bounce a lot, where you just basically press jump and then press jump again, and then you drop down. Unfortunately, I've been so used to a lot of games that have double jump recently that I'm just double tapping the jump button a lot and I accidentally die because, of course, pressing the jump again is the butt bounce. And it's led to a few frustrations, but I'm not going to chalk it to the game. I'm going to blame it on myself for expecting a double jump in this game. In terms of the level design of Pac-Man World, it falls within the kind of platformers where you have to watch where you're running or walking, so it's very precarious all the time, versus something like Mario Odyssey, where most of the game you can kind of like be a bit freer when it comes to like running around and stuff. So you have to kind of gingerly get through these platforms and sections and stuff where you can't rush through it, especially with the camera angles that this game has. And unfortunately, you just can't control the camera angles in this game. It's kind of designed kind of like Super Mario 3D Land, where the camera angle is fixed and you're just kind of like going through the world. In fact, I found it really strange that when you find a lot of these secret mazes in the game, which is essentially kind of like a bonus level where you can play like a Pac-Man World version of Pac-Man mazes, that it starts off zoomed in. It doesn't start off zoomed out. So it's almost like this weird roguelike version where you can only see for a limited distance for something. It's kind of a strange design choice. Of course, that was in the original PS1 release, but still many years later, I'm like thinking to myself, really? Like, why? Why did you think that that was a good idea? Which leads me to one of the things that I wish this game had. And I know that this is trying to stay true to the PS1 release, but I wish you could use like the right analog stick to kind of nudge the camera in different directions so you can kind of know where things are or if you can drop down to a safe area. Because if there's one thing that I feel is holding the game back for me, is the fact that this is so true to the PS1 experience that it does carry a lot of design philosophies that are a bit outdated by today's standards. So, for example, there are moments where you can drop down to a lower level, but they don't make it apparent to you that it's safe to go down there. And that's kind of like how the game hides its secrets, for example. It's like, well, is it safe? Is it not? And you kind of have to be brave and do it. And while I can see some people saying like, oh, but that's kind of like the charm of it, it doesn't help that you can't backtrack to places where the game just purposely like kind of says like, well, you missed the P like from the beginning of the level, tough luck. You have to just replay through the whole level again if you want to have a perfect run. Because like to me, like one of the biggest strengths of Pac-Man World is actually like the variety of areas that you can go to within one level. And again, this is all because of the way that the game was designed in the PS1. I get it. But you can't imagine how something like a right analog stick toggle for the camera, like even if you couldn't do it while you're running, like if you're stationary, I think that would have been fine. I'm just illustrating that one small change could probably have vastly improved the experience. And the last thing that I want to bring up, and again, I'm speaking to you guys as someone who has played through the Nintendo Switch version of Pac-Man World Re-Pac, is that this particular version has frame pacing issues. And it's funny to hear me say that because I normally don't pay attention to performance issues unless it's something that is major or something that really bothers me. But I think in this particular case, it kind of did for me because it's very apparent when you're running from one point to another that the frame rate isn't smooth. Like if you look at this footage, the background is kind of like stuttering as you're running along. It should be one smooth thing. And again, like I normally wouldn't bring that up, but I feel like there are certain moments where I'm trying to hit the button and stuff, and it doesn't feel like the input actually bites, if that makes sense. And I suspect that's probably happening because I'm probably still in a recovery animation from a jump and I'm hitting the jump button, but it's like because of the frame pacing issues, I'm still in that state. And in platformers, you kind of need to have a smooth frame rate. And honestly, I still believe that whoever the developer is could patch it in and fix the frame pacing issues because it is so apparent like across the game that I feel like for platformers, it's very important to have a smooth enough frame rate that'll allow you to be experimental with the game's controls and give you the confidence to execute these fairly complex maneuvers. That being said, if you are a fan of the PS1 game, I don't see why you wouldn't want to get this game. It is still Pac-Man World through and through. I think the story is pretty quirky, and there's no voice acting here. It's just a lot of like gobbledygook and stuff like that, which is really cool. And graphically, I think the developers tried their best to represent the original texturing work on the PS1 version as opposed to like just carrying it over. I think what's actually really interesting about this is if you watch the opening cutscene where the ghosts find out that they didn't actually capture Pac-Man, if you look at the background, there's still the quality of the texture work from the PS1 version. And I thought that was just like really funny because it reminded me of what this game's textures could have looked like. And so I do appreciate the texture work that the developers did in order to make the game look sharper and crisper than just, say, porting all of that over. And even though I criticized the game for being too much like the PS1 version, I actually do think that that's kind of like one of the biggest charms of the game and one of the reasons why I wanted to play the game to begin with. Because we're so used to seeing Pac-Man trapped in a maze that of course it would be a good idea to put Pac-Man in a 3D platformer. Of course that's the natural next step for it. And I do think that if they made a modern Pac-Man World game, that I think that with modern design sensibilities, even if it played similarly to this version of Pac-Man, I think people would be really receptive to it. But anyways, guys, I want to hear what you think. What do you think of what you've seen so far in Pac-Man World Re-Pac? Post your thoughts in the comments below and let's talk about it. And if you like JRPGs, Japanese, niche titles, indies, and more, please consider giving this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.